It's time for us to get started, and we are ready to begin in Genesis 27, and I think we're going to pick up at verse 30. Genesis 27, verse 30. We are talking about Isaac's family. And remember that the promises were repeated to Isaac in chapter 26, 3 and 4. The promises that had been made to Abraham are now repeated to Isaac. Now, Isaac has two sons, Jacob and Esau. And what was the prophecy concerning them while they were still in Rebekah's womb? The older would serve the younger. Now, it looks to me like at the beginning of chapter 27, Isaac tries to subvert that. He tries to get around it. Somebody indicated, as I was studying for this, that Isaac believes he's about to die. I think he lives for another 40 years. And so perhaps he's trying to get on the front edge of this to make sure that something doesn't happen suddenly because he wants Esau to get this blessing, and he's actually willing to kind of preemptively go through this process so that that can happen. But remember, Jacob goes in and deceives him, and he gets the blessing. And Esau does not, obviously. And we made it to verse 30. And notice the text here. It says, as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, when Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac, his father, Esau, his brother, came in from his hunting. He also prepared delicious food and brought it to his father. And he said to his father, let my father arise and eat of this son's game, that you may bless me. His father Isaac said to him, who are you? He answered, I am your son, your firstborn, Esau. Then Isaac trembled very violently and said, who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? And I ate it all before you came, and I have blessed him. Yes, and he shall be blessed. As soon as Esau heard the words of his father, he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry and said to his father, bless me also, even me also, O my father. But he said, your brother came deceitfully, and he has taken away your blessing. Esau said, is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has cheated me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing. Then he said, have you not reserved a blessing for me? Isaac answered to Esau, behold, I have made him lord over you. And all his brothers I have given to him for servants. With grain and wine I have sustained him. What then can I do for you, my son? Esau said to his father, have you but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Then his father answered him and said, behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. When you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck. So Esau comes in, and what is discovered pretty quickly?
He's done lost it all.
He's done lost it all, right? There is no blessing left for him. And I want you to see the degree to which when Isaac thinks he's blessing Esau, he gives him everything. He doesn't have one thing left for Jacob. He knows, right? Esau, he tells him this story of, he's already gotten me out of my birthright. Isaac knows already. He tells him that as if he already does know. And so what you see here is that even in the words that he says, behold, I have made him lord over you. It's almost directly in contrast to what the promise was to Rebekah before the boys were even born. And so you see the degree to which Isaac intended to bless Esau and doesn't leave one thing for Jacob. And of course, God's purpose here is worked out. But in Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 20, the Hebrew writer says that by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau even regarding things to come. Now I want you to think about that. How does this demonstrate faith on Isaac's part? To me, it looks like it demonstrates disobedience or trying to circumvent God's plan. But what about this account demonstrates faith on Isaac's part? He didn't change it. And I think that's it. I think when Esau comes in and he says, yes, and he shall be blessed, I think maybe the idea there is that Isaac recognizes his failure on the front end. And when he sees what has happened, he says, It is what it is. The blessings of the patriarchs had a prophetic quality to them, right? Noah's blessing, or cursing, maybe we should say that, of Canaan was prophetic. Not just, it wasn't just Noah ranting. It was him saying what was going to happen. Jacob's blessing in 49 is going to have a prophetic quality to it, specifically with regards to Judah, his son. And I think Isaac recognizes here that even though he spoke this thinking that he was talking to Esau, it was right when he said it about Jacob. Now, it's also prophetic what he says to Esau. Because what nation would Esau become the father of? Edom, right. And where did Edom, what kind of territory did Edom live in? They were nomadic early. When they finally settle, what area, what? Barren, that's right. They make their homes up in the cliffs. They have, it's Obadiah, right, that talks about they think that they're safe up there in the rocks and in the crags. It's south of the Dead Sea in a pretty barren, desolate place. They're going to be away from the fatness of the earth. So one of the things that's accomplished by this is one of the Israelites might say, well, Edom's pretty closely related to us. Why do they end up here in this terrible place when we're going to the land of milk and honey? And this is the explanation right here. We have that kind of working behind all of this. So there is this promise in verse 40, you shall serve your brother, but when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck. I think we're talking about the nation there, because during David's day, they would be suppressed, but during the divided kingdom, Edom would break free, and they really wouldn't ever be under Jewish dominion again after that period of time. At least in a literal physical way. Okay, anything through 40 that you'd like to mention?
This was the days of the patriarchs, and we know that God spoke to the ruling fathers and worked through the ruling fathers. But even beyond that, we know of occasions where David spoke of his current situation, but he also reflected prophetic, statements that he wasn't even aware of at the time he was saying it. And so, that does happen throughout biblical history, how God uses these men to accomplish his will.
That's very good.
Do you think that here Isaac sort of knew that his young son had birthright and he was giving all the blessings to?
Do you think, let me see if I understand. Are you saying that you think Isaac knew that it was actually Jacob? Oh, I'm sorry.
He knew that Jacob had gotten his birthright.
Yeah.
And that he was giving all the blessings to Esau.
Oh, okay. So so you thought he was maybe trying to balance it out since Jacob's going to get the. Yeah. It's interesting. I'm still not as clear on this as I thought I was before I started teaching Genesis. So that's not an ideal situation to be in, obviously. But when he comes in verse 36, he's cheated me 2 times. He took away my birthright, and now he has taken away my blessing. I think I would have thought of that as one cheating, right? That the birthright and the blessing would have been tied together. But maybe the idea here is that the birthright, I don't know if there's anything that Esau or Isaac could do about who was going to get the inheritance, right? Who was going to get the family farm, as it were. But Isaac thought he could still do something about the blessing part, about the future that they were going to be given. And I don't know. And this is one passage where maybe that started my thinking on maybe thinking there was a distinction between the birthright and the blessing. But I don't know what to make of all that other than to say this, that God intended it, at least the blessing, to have always been for Jacob. And it was Esau's own failure that led to his giving up of the birthright. And it was Isaac's, it was always the Lord's will for Jacob to receive this blessing that Isaac has intended here. It may be that the pot of stew thing, that Esau could have gotten something out of this whole situation, and he just threw it away because of his carelessness. But that Jacob was always going to get the blessing, I think.
I find it interesting there in 36 where he says that he took away my birthright.
Yeah.
Esau had a lot to do with it.
That's right. Yeah, he didn't come snatch it while he was sleeping. That's right.
I was studying this, and I may be wrong, but there's something about this story about Esau that reminds me of the New Testament passage where he says that on that day everyone will say, there will be those that will say to me, Lord, Lord. Because Esau knew God's plan.
Yeah.
Well, all of them in this story did, but they tried to change that by their own will instead of letting God's plan be carried out. And I think we can learn a lesson from these people in this story.
That's good. Okay. Anything else through verse 40? All right. Okay. Very good.
All right. So the situation, you obviously have some conflict here, and you're going to see how this is definitely going to escalate as we progress. Verse 41, now Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. But the words of Esau, her older son, were told to Rebekah. So she sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, behold, your brother Esau comforts himself about you, planning to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice, arise, flee to Laban, my brother, in Haran, and stay with him a while, until your brother's fury turns away, until your brother's anger turns away from you, and he forgets what you have done to him. Then I will send and bring you from there. Why should I bereft of you both in one day? Then Rebekah said to Isaac, I loathe my life because of the Hittite women. If Jacob marries one of the Hittite women like these, one of the women of the land, what good will my life be to me? Then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and directed him, you must not take a wife from the Canaanite women. Arise, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take as your wife from there one of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may become a company of peoples. May he give the blessing of Abraham to you and to your offspring with you, that you may take possession of the land of your sojournings that God gave to Abraham. Thus Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Padan Aram, to Laban, son of Bethuel, the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, Jacob's and Esau's mother. So we see, obviously, Esau has some pretty harsh feelings against his brother, but he knows that, obviously Isaac is in his elder age at this point in time. So he decides he's going to wait till Isaac is gone before he carries this out. But he's going to kill his brother. He has full intentions of killing his brother. And so Rebekah hears word of this. And so what kind of plan does she devise to save Jacob's life? Yeah, send him away. That would be a hard thing to do, send your child away. But what other choice does she have at this point? She knows what's coming. And she obviously has no control over Esau. And I don't even know that Isaac has any control of Esau at this point in time. So she plans to send him away, and she gives him instruction about finding a wife while he's gone. And it's not just sending him away, but where's she sending him? Yeah, the family. He's to go to family and retrieve him a wife. This sounds a lot like Abraham sending his servant away. He's going to go to the same household. And so that's the plan. But Rebekah even approaches Isaac in this. And it seems that it plays out here. She's trying to get reinforcement for this. I don't know if Jacob is reluctant in this in any way or what, but she goes to Isaac. And so Isaac goes before Jacob and directs him. And it seems like it's at this point in time that Isaac seems to embrace, what God has instructed the plans for Jacob. Because here he bestows, the blessing, the passing down. May God, carry out the promises that he gave to Abraham. May that be fulfilled through you. And so he sends them off and tells them, with instruction again, not to marry any of the Canaanite women, but to go up to his mother's family and find a wife for himself there. And so that's exactly what he does. You got anything?
No, not really. Padanaram, you know where this is. It's pretty much the Hebrew description for the place we would call Mesopotamia, but we're talking more about like in the northwestern part. So on our drill class map where Haran is, that's pretty much the area that we're looking at going back to. Um, but other than that, I don't think I have anything. You do have a few echoes of like Cain and Abel here, and maybe we've got another. Um, the book of Genesis is much more about conflict than I realized the first that having gone through it this time. The tension between so you've got Cain and Abel, and then tension between Hagar and Sarah, and now tension between Jacob and Esau, and you could almost outline the book with the conflicts that are going on in the book, and I'm sure I've left some out through there, but that's something to note.
Do we know their approximate ages?
Yeah, I believe that Jacob is about 57 at this point. In some of my notes, I had something else, but I think he's about 57.
Esau or Does he have what?
He does. He has two. The Canaanite wives that he married at the end of 27. Is that right? Yes. So right after. Do what now?
She said she would go find a wife.
Oh, I think she's talking to Jacob this time. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I may be.
But he is about to take another one.
Esau will marry another wife, and Jacob will end up with four before we're done. At least the four that we read about. So
Yeah, he's told to take one, but he goes a little bit further than that.
And one of them he gets tricked, and
He
so
does.
that explains two. But so anyway, people get themselves in messes, don't they? All right. Anything else that you'd like to say through verse 5? We're going to see, Brother Gerald mentioned the blessings. Blessing is a key word in this chapter. Blessing might be the key word of Genesis, but blessing is key, and it's repeated 3 times in 28, 1 through 5. But this is just Isaac previewing that, and then we're going to see God speak to that later on. So we've got the promises to Abraham, Genesis 12, 1 through 3, to Isaac, 26, 3 and 4. Keep your mental pens there, and then we'll come back to that in just a second. Now, verse 6. Now Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Paddan-aram to take a wife from there, and that as he blessed him, he directed him, "You must not take a wife from among the Canaanite women," and that Jacob had obeyed his father and his mother and gone to Paddan-aram. So when Esau saw that the Canaanite women did not please Isaac his father, Esau went to Ishmael and took as his wife, besides the wives he had, Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebaioth. All right, so Esau thinks that he's going to make a bad situation better, and I'm pretty sure he just makes it worse. But he's resentful of Jacob, and resentful of the idea, I think, that Isaac and Rebekah now are kind of casting their lot with him and say, look, the future belongs with you, so you're going to have to go and you're going to have to marry from back in the homeland, because Esau has turned to these Canaanite women. Well, I mean, I know how that would make me feel. And so he thinks, well, I'm going to fix this. And so he gets a pretty close relative, Ishmael's descendant, and they're going to marry. But it's not the same thing as what Isaac and Rebekah are trying to instruct. And so really, I just think we have an example of Esau trying to repair a situation that is irreparable by his own decision so far.
And actually, I look at it in a completely different.
Oh, okay.
I almost look at it in spite, because the instruction was given to Jacob not to marry of the Canaanite. What did Esau do?
Yeah,
He's already married of the Canaanite women.
that's right.
So it's almost like it's a jab towards his parent. He's maybe he views that he's already lost favor with his folks at this point in time. And like you said, everything is pointed to Jacob.
Yes.
Positive right now. And so maybe this is, him taking a shot at his folks. We know that, his wives were kind of a thorn in their side already. Yeah. And so he's going to take another one that's going to create even greater problems. I don't know, but we know that, he's going to distance himself from his folks from this point forward.
That's right.
So
it also shows that the bad choices that Esau has done all the way up to when he
traded for a bowl of soup. And then around that time, he took the 2 wives from the Canaanites.
Yeah.
And you have to know that as he was being raised up, the father would actually tell him what had been prophesied to Abraham, not to marry none of the Canaanites. And then here he goes ahead and marries 2. And then because that he actually heard from his father again in the blessing, that he wasn't supposed to marry Canaanites, that you're supposed to marry some of your own people. And I think more than he done in spite, he thought, well, if I can get as close to Abraham as I can kinfolks, I'll look better than Jacob did. And I think that's why he went to Abraham's son's daughter, to be closer to Abraham in the linkage. But what he done was still wrong.
Right. Well, I think you see a track record of short-sightedness with Esau. He just doesn't think about the long-term consequences of his actions. And that's the example that we're given in Hebrews 12. That's the lesson. And the other thing, as you may mention, if Isaac wants Esau to be the one, to be the blessed one, well, you think he would have done a lot more instruction about what that blessing was supposed to look like, how he was supposed to be accomplishing that. But you don't see that. And so we see maybe, we see the failure there, maybe in multiple ways, of the folks in this story. All right, anything else through verse 9?
I do have one of those questions.
Yeah.
This is a Larson question, right?
No, it really does not affect the outcome.
Yeah.
It was just one of those questions that just interested me. I wonder how Rebecca heard about Esau planning to kill Jacob. Because the way I read that, it said that Esau said in his heart. I don't even know that Esau told anyone that. And I just wondered if maybe it was a possibility that maybe the Lord told Rebecca to get Jacob out of there.
That's very interesting, because you have verse 41, Esau said to himself, and then verse 42, but the words of Esau, her older son, were told to Rebekah. And not every time, but often, when that passive voice is used, like the words were told, where it doesn't say who did the telling, very often it's called the divine passive. And in the Bible, when you read it, it just says, well, it was done, or it did happen. And it's like, okay, well, very often it's a divine action that's happening, because it just doesn't give a subject. So I don't know if it's every time, but it's very often, especially in the Gospels, that's the case. Anything else? Yeah, somebody's listening. Yeah, that's right. Little bird or something. All right. I think we're ready for verse 10.
Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he came to a certain place and stayed that night, because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you, your offspring, shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. So Jacob departs, and he makes a stop at nightfall and sets up camp and goes to sleep. And this place, Luz, which would be just a short distance north of Jerusalem, he has this dream. And what's taking place in the dream?
The angels are going up and down a ladder, and God is at the top of the ladder.
But God speaks to him. Yeah, that's the big part. God is at the top of the ladder, and he speaks to him. And here he extends the promises that's been given to Abraham and to Isaac. Now they are extended to Jacob. And he tells them that, he is going to bless him, and that his offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, spread abroad. And he's, to the west and to the east, the north and the south. So they're going to cover all the territory. And also, he said, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Now you think about, that promise there, along with the vision that he's seeing. He's seeing this ladder, or set of steps, as it were, and angels are ascending and descending. Does that bring anything to mind when you read that? Maybe something in the New Testament, like in John 1. You remember early on when Jesus recruits Philip and Nathaniel, and you remember he meets Philip, brings him before Nathaniel, and he meets Nathaniel, and he says, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit, no guile. Of course, Nathaniel's taken back in that, and he says, how do you know me? You don't know me. You don't know me at all. And Jesus says, before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you. And it's at that point that Nathanael answered him, said, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. So I don't know what was taking place under that fig tree, but it was obviously a very private moment. To me, I wonder if it was a prayer, the way Nathanael responds. But anyway, Jesus responds to him and says, because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these. And he said to him, truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. Is that not what Jacob is just saying? He's seen an image of it. He may not have seen it in its full glory, but he's seen it. Now, I don't know that Jacob understands the full meaning of what he's seeing. But basically, he's seeing that third promise. He's seeing a vision of that third promise that God has made to him. All the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Through you, Jacob, through your seed, this is going to be accomplished. And this is a representation of what's going to happen. This is the bridge. Christ is going to be that bridge that's going to mend the relationship between man and God. That's going to connect man to God. Earth and heaven. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Like you're saying, he's pointing back to that prophecy and saying, I'm feeling it right now.
Yep. And again, I don't know that Jacob fully understands, but he's, he's blown away at what's taking place. And certainly this is instilled to him, a pretty impactful impression on and so he sets up the stone that he used basically as a pillow. He sets it up as a monument, to remember this place, to remember this occasion, that this would become a memorial. And he makes a promise. If God will fulfill his promise to him as far as just taking care of him, he said, I'm yours. If you will see me through, this journey that I'm on, what I'm going through, and bring me back to my Father's house, I am yours. I will do everything needed. So.
Yeah, I think that's good. So these three promises are repeated: land, nation, and seed. Now think about the circumstances in which God makes these promises to Jacob. What prospects does he have for a seed right now? If I understand correctly, he's 57, unmarried, and doesn't know anybody that he can marry, at least at this moment, right? What about the land promise? How's that looking? He's leaving, right? He's headed the wrong direction. So God makes these promises, and he will fulfill these promises to Jacob, even though he's unmarried, he's 57, he's running away from the promised land. And what about in you all families of the earth shall be blessed? Does Jacob seem to be a real source of blessing so far? Not even his own family. He's actually the result of the curse that has come on Esau, right? So land doesn't look good, seed doesn't look good, blessing don't look great, right? And yet God will fulfill these promises through him and his family. So if Abraham and Sarah, if it looked unlikely that God will fulfill the promises through them, God still did. Maybe Isaac and Rebekah, God still did. Jacob, God still will. I think that's interesting. And then
I think also that Jacob knew from family history that Abraham actually had his lineage child with Sarah, and both of them wasn't even supposed to be able to have a child.
Yeah.
So I think it actually goes to the faith of Jacob through what he's done and told of the history line and his blessings from his father. And then he said that he was afraid and amazed by what he seen of the angels coming up, down, and then God actually speaking to him. I mean, I couldn't even begin to fathom if you was to see that today and you was laying down in a grassy knoll on a rock and you look up and then you're seeing all this and you hear God talking to you. And I believe that when he told him that the blessings that he is going to give, after you sing that, this other stuff ain't no big deal.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Very good.
I think we should emphasize too that God's spoke to him directly, just the relationship you have.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Just that would be your everyday life. God can
That's right. Yeah, and I love the phrase at the end of 22, all that you give to me, I will give to you.
Mm-hmm.
So what does his name mean? It means grabber or a supplanter. And one commentary said he's no longer a grabber, he's a giver because he recognizes the blessing of God. And it may be that he's kind of making a deal with God. I wonder if it might also be, he knows the kind of guy he's been. And it may be that he's saying, if after all I've done, God is still going to bless me like this, then I'm his. And so maybe if you're still going to see me through, and if you're still going to watch over me, even after the crooked things I've done, then I'm already yours. But really, he does not refer to God as his God until much later. And so maybe it's kind of one of those, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief kind of things.
It's a process.
Yeah, I'm accepting him, but maybe there's some gaps here. Okay, very good. Anything else through chapter 28 that you'd like to say before we move into 29?
Is this the first time we see like a 10th?
Well, to God directly, yes, but Abraham paid a tenth to Melchizedek, and because Abraham was a representative of God, I think there's a connection here. Because Melchizedek did I say Abraham? Because Melchizedek was a representative of God, the priest, and that's where the tenth would be to the Levitical priest. So maybe there's some previews of that too. All right, chapter 29. Let's do some summarizing here. How about that? This is a familiar story to most of us, and if it's not a familiar story to you, that's okay. I'll try to do as good a job as I can summarizing. So Jacob is heading to Padan Aram, the land of Mesopotamia, and he gets to a well of water, and there are the stone is in the way. And this is verse 4. Jacob said to them, my brothers, where do you come from? They said, we're from Haran or Haran. He said to them, do you know Laban the son of Nahor? He said, we know him. He said, well with him. They said, it is well. And see, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep. Behold, it's still high day. It is not time for livestock to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go pasture them. They said, we cannot until all the flocks are gathered together and the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well. Then we water the sheep. Well, here comes Rachel, and Jacob sees her, and he moves the stone out of the way. He kisses her and weeps aloud. I don't think this like he's going to end up marrying her. I don't think this is romantic. I think this is a greeting here. And verse 14, surely you are my bone and my flesh. So then he comes down to verse, no, that's Laban. I'm sorry. I'm not doing a good job summarizing, am I? So then she runs back. She tells Laban, this would be Rebekah's brother. So this is Jacob's uncle. Goes back. Jacob comes to them. And Laban said to Jacob, verse 15, because you're my kinsman, should you serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel. And he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. Laban said, it is better that I give you to her than I should give her to any other man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. And they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. Verse 21, then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife that I may go into her, for my time is completed. So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. But in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob and went into her. Laban gave his female servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her servant. And in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And Jacob said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? Laban said, it is not done so in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other one also in return for serving me another 7 years. Jacob did so and completed her week. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave his female servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel to be her servant. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served Laban for another 7 years. All right. Works for 7, gets tricked. Now, this is not right on Laban's part, but it is poetic justice, isn't it?
Definitely.
That this is what would happen to Laban, to Jacob. And I love the fact, the fact that at the end of this, Laban says, well, that's not the way it's done around here. We always give the older. Like, well, it'd been nice to let Jacob know that. Like,
that information might have been important earlier.
Instead of year 7, that would have been real handy. Yeah. I used to think he had to work for 7, then he got Leah, and then he had to work for 7 more, and he got Rachel. That is not the way it was. He worked for 7, got Leah 1 week, then Rachel, and then has to work for 7 more. Notice that the text says in the 7 years prior to his marriages, they seemed to him just a few days, right? That's beautiful. Yeah. The 7 years just passed like that because he was excited about the opportunity. It does not say the same thing about the next 7 years. Well, now he has 2 wives, so there's that. But also, now he's working and without the prospect of the reward on the other side. Now, I want to say this. Rachel evidently was Jacob's choice, obviously. But I'm not sure she was the Lord's choice. And here's what I mean by that. Both the priestly and the messianic line are going to come through Leah. And we're going to see some things about Leah that are really compelling as we go through that are not quite as compelling about Rachel. Rachel evidently was beautiful. Leah seems to be, in the true sense of the word, godly. She has an awareness of the Lord in the day in, day out events of life. Now, Rachel may have come to that, I don't know, but at least initially, Leah is aware of the Lord in a way that Rachel does not appear to be. And it will be Leah who ends up being buried in Machpelah, not Rachel. The family cave, the family cemetery. I don't know if that says anything, but it may say something about a relationship that developed between Leah and Jacob.
I always feel sorry for Leah, but
Yeah.
just feel a lot better.
Well, good. I do think there's some indication, especially in the next paragraph, that maybe there is. Now, at the beginning, my text says she's hated. I think others say unloved, but either way, it doesn't get better. Either way you define that. But I do think that there may be some progress here. I don't know that she's ever more favored than Rachel, but maybe she comes to a place where she's not unloved. And so
I wonder if that word there is the same as, parents in comparison to the Lord, just love less.
Yeah.
Type.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the same word as like when he says, Jacob I have loved, Esau I've hated. Well, he didn't hate Esau in the sense that he didn't have any regard for him. It's
Mhm.
because Edom had been blessed in many ways that other nations hadn't. It was just that he loved them less than he had loved Israel.
And that would make sense.
And so maybe that's what's going on here. But we're going to see some things Leah says here that I think she means more than just he doesn't love me as much as Rachel. I think there's probably some real dislike is. I mean, anyway, we'll look at it.
She definitely feels like a second class
Yeah,
wife, no question.
I think that's right, for sure. All right, anything else? I summarized that. Actually, I ended up reading most of it because the Bible says it better than I could. So I think his work was to serve as some sort of dowry. Right, when he goes, he has no money to pay a dowry, but 7 years of free labor would be pretty significant, and then it ends up being 14. But I don't know everything else to say about that. You may have something that you would like to mention. Okay.
Anyone? All right, well, we'll pick up in 31. Here, Jacob's going to start his family, and boy, does he start it in a big way. When the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben. For she said, because the Lord has looked upon my affliction, for now my husband will love me. She conceived again and bore a son, and said, because the Lord has heard that I am hated, he has given me this son also. She called his name Simeon. Again, she conceived and bore a son, and said, now this time my husband will be attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore she called his name was called Levi. And she conceived again and bore a son, and said, this time I will praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah. Then she ceased bearing. When Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she envied her sister. She said to Jacob, give me children, or I shall die. Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of your womb? Then she said, here is my servant Bilhah. Go into her so that she may give birth on my behalf, that even I may have children through her. So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife, and Jacob went into her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, God has judged me and has also heard my voice and given me a son. Therefore she called his name Dan. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, with mighty wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister and have prevailed. So she called his name Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had ceased bearing children, she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Then Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. And Leah said, good fortune has come, so she called his name Gad. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son, and Leah said, happy am I, for women have called me happy. So she called his name Asher. So I know that's a lot to take in. There's a lot of names and a lot of things going on. But it seems like this is all happening during that second 7-year term. And so you have Leah that is bearing a number of children, and when she's done, Rachel decides to turn her servant over to Jacob. That way she could birth children on her behalf, because she's left out in the cold in this situation. And so she gives her servant, and Jacob takes a third wife. So she begins bearing children, and Leah begins to do the same thing. She decides to give her servant to Jacob. So now Jacob goes from none to 4 in a very short order. He's got 4 wives now, and the children are coming. They are coming in droves. And you notice, with names, we give our children names and we just go by what we like. Sometimes there's still family names that are passed down, but here you see how children had really deep meaning to them. And oftentimes it was the current situation that they were going through. And that's how these children are named, based upon the current situation. They're given names. And so, wow, bunch of children.
Yeah.
So he goes from none to a bunch in a short order.
Yeah, you're right. let me add to what I was saying earlier about Leah and Rachel. Look at the end of 29. Every time, except for with regards to Levi, but I don't think that's like an intentional omission or something. I think it's just she doesn't repeat it here. She recognizes the Lord's hand in it. The Lord has looked upon my affliction. The Lord has heard. This time I will praise the Lord. That's on child 1, 2, and 4. And every time she says, maybe this is the time that Jacob will love me. She does not say anything about that with regards to Judah. And so maybe you would say, well, maybe his attitude toward her has changed. But then, if you drop down to chapter 30, to 20, God has endowed me with good health. Now my husband will honor me because I've borne him 6 sons. So maybe it hasn't changed, and so maybe there is some still longing there for it. But look at Rachel in chapter 30. When she sees Leah's, I don't know what we'd call this, success, when she sees it, what is her attitude? Jacob's fault, the word there is envy. So envy, somebody said that jealousy and envy, the difference is jealousy, I'd like to have what they had. Envy is, I'd like to have what they have, and I kind of resent them for having it too, right? And so that's what she's feeling here. And in addition to that, so she blames Jacob. This is, she doesn't look like Leah here, who is recognized. And then also, when Jacob responds to her, am I in the place of God who has withheld you? He blames the Lord for this. And maybe there's a sense in which we would say God is responsible. But and then the solution is not to pray. It is to give another wife. And that doesn't look like the best solution. Now, maybe we would say it's hard to be overly critical here because nobody's making great decisions in some of these areas. But I do think you see a little bit less of a spiritual awareness with Rachel maybe than you do with Leah. And I don't want to overstate that case, but I do just want to say that even though she's maybe Jacob's ideal, she's not doing ideal things maybe in certain ways, and there's a lesson in that. Leah's name means cow, but she was godly, and it'd be better to have a godly cow than an ungodly. Rachel's means you lamb, and be better, and that's true. It's.
But this also shows.
The Bible says it. So think about that for the next few days.
This actually shows.
Glad I didn't say that.
That was actually done at that time, because even back to Abraham and Sarah, and Sarah gives her handmaid to Abraham. Undoubtedly, it was in the society of the lineage of God's people that if the wife couldn't actually have children, it was allowed for the wife to give the husband, the handmaid, to bear children. And because even here they do it, so undoubtedly it must have been a teaching among the society at that time through that lineage that if you got to where you couldn't have children, it was okay that you could give your handmaid to your husband to bear children, because there's nothing said against it. And at this same time, here he started out, didn't have nothing. He's got a whole house full of them, and he ain't never left Laban's house. He's still there with all these women and all these children.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly fornication because, whether it be Jacob or, whatever, they took responsibility for him. They married him, they become wife, but still, it wasn't God's design.
Yeah, that's right.
In the end, it still was not God's design.
I think it was one of those allowances that God made that we would not. So just like with divorce in Deuteronomy 24, it's not something that God would allow.
Other thing is, if this wasn't allowed, you never would have had 12 tribes, because from these children, the 12 tribes came into being.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank y'all very much.
Beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.